All right, ready to dive into something delicious.
Always up for that.
Today, it's Indian cuisine. I've been looking over this excerpt, Indian Cuisine, a culinary masterpiece. Just reading it's making me hungry.
Yeah, that title's not exaggerating.
It really gets you thinking, though, beyond just recipes. What makes Indian food so unique?
You hit the nail on the head. The source does a fantastic job of talking about the sheer variety in Indian food. Most people just think spicy, but there's a whole world to discover.
Right, like most folks know the whole North India versus South India thing, butter chicken or like dosa.
Exactly. But this excerpt is hinting there's way more to the story, like a lot more.
So much more than just those two, huh?
It's like, imagine India's got all these secret culinary treasures just waiting. The excerpt even mentions Bengal, known for amazing fish. And Kerala, seafood's a huge deal there. Then there's Gujarat, almost entirely vegetarian. Each region is like its own little food personality.
Whoa, that's wild. So where do we even start unpacking all this?
Well, got to start with the heart of it, right? The spices.
Ah, the famous Indian spices.
The excerpt calls it masala magic, which I love. It goes way deeper than just heat. It's this crazy depth of flavor they build.
They lit out turmeric, cumin, coriander, cardamom. Like, what makes those so special out of all the spices in the world?
It's like each one brings something totally unique. Cardamom, for instance. It's got this sweetness and warmth, but then there's also this hint of menthol, totally sets it apart.
Huh, never thought about it that way.
And then you've got turmeric. Besides that warm, earthy flavor, it's been recognized for its anti-inflammatory properties for ages, especially in traditional Indian medicine.
Oh yeah, Ayurveda, right.
Exactly, Ayurveda. That whole system emphasizes the balance between mind, body, spirit. A lot of Indian cooking spices are deeply rooted in Ayurveda.
So it's like the food is designed to be good for you on like multiple levels.
Exactly. Food and well-being, they're connected. That's a huge part of what makes Indian food so special.
Okay, so we've got regional diversity, spice magic, and ancient wisdom all mixed in. This is starting to feel like more than a meal. It's a whole experience.
And we haven't even touched on the social and spiritual side of food in Indian culture yet.
Oh, right, the excerpt mentioned that. So it's not just what's on your plate, but like everything surrounding the meal. Traditions, connections.
Exactly. In many parts of India, meals are when families, communities come together, sharing stories, celebrating life. Food's not just fuel, it's a symbol of love, generosity, connection.
You know, I'm starting to think this might be deeper than just a deep dive into Indian food. It's like we're seeing a whole different way of life.
I think you're onto something. That's the magic of exploring cultures through their cuisine. You get more than just a taste.
So going back to the regions, does that social side play out differently everywhere? Like each region has its own unique customs around food.
Absolutely. Gujarat's a great example. They have a strong vegetarian tradition. It's influenced by Jainism, which teaches nonviolence towards all living beings. So over time, it led to this incredibly diverse and delicious vegetarian cuisine.
Wow, so the food reflects the values and beliefs of the people.
You got it. You see that all over India. Spices, ingredients, cooking techniques, they all tell a story about the land, the people, and their history.
Okay, before we get too lost in the culture, can we loop back to spices for a sec? All this masala magic talk has me curious about how these spice blends actually work.
Knew you'd get to that. It's one thing to list spices, but seeing how they create those mind-blowing flavors is where it gets really interesting.
All right, spill the beans. What's the secret?
A key player is garam masala. Literally, it means hot spice. It's a blend of different spices.
Okay, sounds straightforward enough.
But here's the catch. Each region has its own version of garam masala.
Wait, seriously, different everywhere.
Yep. So two dishes, both using garam masala, could taste totally different depending on where they're from. It's all about those subtle variations in the blend.
Wow, I had no idea. That's crazy. Each region has its own secret recipe, basically.
Exactly. That's what makes exploring Indian cuisine so exciting. There's always something new to discover.
All right, so we've got all these crazy good spices, but is there, like, one MVP, the most essential one in Indian cooking?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Like asking an artist their favorite color. But if I had to pick, I'd probably go with turmeric.
Turmeric, the health superstar. I'm all ears.
Turmeric is incredibly versatile. That beautiful golden color it adds to dishes, that warm, earthy flavor. It's the base for so many curries and stews. And then, of course, all the health benefits we talked about.
You mentioned it's used in Ayurveda. What's that connection about?
Well, in Ayurveda, turmeric is seen as balancing for all three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. They represent different energies in the body, and turmeric's ability to harmonize them is key to overall well-being.
Okay, so it's like a multitasking superhero spice, flavor, color, and helps balance your body.
You could say that. It's a prime example of how food and wellness are so intertwined in Indian culture.
All right, before my stomach starts rumbling too loud, gotta ask about ghee. The excerpt mentioned it as a healthy fat, but I'm always wary of too much butter. Is it really that good for you?
Great question. Ghee is clarified butter. Basically pure butterfat. It's got this rich, nutty flavor that adds a lot to Indian dishes.
Okay, but still, butter, right.
It is saturated fat, yeah. But it's actually considered beneficial in Ayurveda.
How so?
Well, Ayurveda believes ghee helps digestion, nourishes the brain, even improves mental clarity. Plus, it's got those fat-soluble vitamins. Moderation is key, like with anything. But ghee's more than just tasty.
Ghee, turmeric, cardamom, we're just scratching the surface here. And I'm already blown away by how intricate Indian cuisine is. Clearly, there's so much more to explore.
Absolutely right. This is just a taste. We haven't even gotten to the huge variety of vegetarian dishes, the different breads in each region, the sweets that finish off a traditional meal.
Well, I think this is the ghee, the turmeric, but there's one thing we haven't gotten to yet, and that's how many vegetarian options there are.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like a vegetarian's dream. The source really makes a point of how Indian cuisine just goes all out in that department.
I feel like lots of cuisines say they're vegetarian friendly, but Indian food seems to take it to a whole new level. What's the reason for that, do you think?
Well, a few things, actually. Like we touched on earlier, Jainism in Gujarat really promotes a vegetarian lifestyle. But even beyond that, there's this deep respect in Indian culture for nature and all living things. That extends to the food they eat.
Makes sense. So it's not just about avoiding meat, it's more like celebrating all those amazing plant-based ingredients.
Exactly. And Indian cuisine is all about showing off that variety. Think about dal, for example. You've got that hearty lentil stew, and it comes in tons of different versions. Or chana masala, that super flavorful chickpea dish, packed with protein and spices.
Okay, now you're making me hungry. Those dishes always sound so good on menus, but I'm not gonna lie to get a little intimidated, all those unfamiliar names and ingredients.
I hear you. It could definitely seem overwhelming at first, but honestly, when you break them down, a lot of these dishes are pretty simple to make. Take dal, for instance. It's basically lentils, simmered with onions, tomatoes, some spices, maybe coconut milk or cream. Add veggies, adjust the heat, make it your own.
So it's like a blank canvas for your own culinary creativity. Love that. What about kama masala, though? What makes that so good?
Chana masala is all about those spices working together. You've got the warmth of cumin and coriander, the tang from ginger and garlic, then a touch of sweetness from things like cinnamon and cardamom. Oh, and of course those chickpeas. They're the star of the show, all plump and flavorful.
Speaking of flavor, the excerpt called chana masala hearty and aromatic. It's not just the taste, it's the whole sensory experience, right?
100%. That's a big part of what makes Indian cuisine so captivating. It pulls you in with all your senses, the smells, the colors, the textures. It's all part of creating this symphony of flavor.
Okay, you've officially convinced me on the vegetarian front, but let's get real for a minute. The excerpt did ask the question, is Indian food the best cuisine in the world? That's a bold claim.
It is bold, and at the end of the day, it's all subjective, right? But I think the source does make some good points. We talked about the huge variety, the way they use spices, the focus on fresh ingredients, and that whole connection to culture and well-being.
True. But isn't French cuisine supposed to be like the ultimate, all about technique and refinement? Where does Indian food fit in with that?
It's a good comparison. French cuisine is all about those meticulous techniques, that elegant presentation. Indian cuisine, on the other hand, it's often seen as more rustic, more home style.
More about bold flavors and textures than fancy plating?
You could put it that way, but that doesn't mean Indian food isn't sophisticated. Those complex spice blends, the balance of flavors, the traditional cooking methods passed down through generations. There's a lot of skill and artistry there.
Sounds like both cuisines have their own strengths. Kind of like comparing apples and oranges, I guess.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of food, really. There's no single best. It all comes down to personal taste, what speaks to you, you know?
Couldn't agree more, but I think it's safe to say Indian cuisine has something truly special to offer. This deep dive has been a total eye-opener for me, and I bet our listener is feeling the same way.
I hope so. And remember, we're just scratching the surface here. There's a whole universe of Indian flavors out there waiting to be explored.
Speaking of exploration, the excerpt talked about how food in India is this spiritual and social experience. We've touched on it, but I'd love to go deeper. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, picture this. You're sharing a thali. It's a platter with all these little bowls, each with a different dish. It's not just a meal. It's this whole communal experience, celebrating abundance and togetherness.
It's more than just fueling up then.
Way more. It's about connecting with your loved ones, really savoring the flavors, appreciating the artistry of the food. It's about slowing down, being present in that moment.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it, and it makes you wonder, is there something we can learn from that in our own lives? I mean, things are so busy these days. Do we lose sight of that connection, that mindfulness around food?
That's a really interesting question. In lots of cultures, food has become more about convenience, just fuel, instead of about connection and celebration. But I think there's this growing trend towards mindful eating, appreciating the food itself and the people you share it with.
That's a good sign. And I think exploring cuisines like Indian food with all their history and traditions can help us tap back into that appreciation.
I couldn't agree more. It's about being open to new experiences, trying new things, learning from other cultures.
So, for our listener who's feeling inspired to experience Indian cuisine firsthand, where would you say they should start?
That's the fun part. There are so many paths you could take. You could research different regional cuisines, find a local restaurant that specializes in a certain style, or you could try cooking some simple dishes at home. There are tons of resources online, cookbooks, everything.
Don't forget about those amazing spice blends we talked about earlier. Experimenting with those is a great way to really get a feel for how complex and nuanced Indian flavors can be.
Absolutely. And the best part is there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's all about finding what you enjoy, letting your taste buds be your guide.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From regional differences to the spiritual side of food, we've just begun to explore what makes Indian cuisine so incredible.
And that's what makes it so exciting. There's always more to discover.
But before we wrap things up, I'm curious, what's the one thing you'd want our listener to take away from this conversation?
That's a tough one. There's so much. I think the biggest takeaway is that Indian cuisine is a journey for the senses and for the soul. It's a tapestry woven from all these different regions, ancient wisdom, and this deep respect for food and its power to connect us.
Wow, that's a beautiful way to put it. It's like we've gotten this amazing taste, but it's up to each of us to continue the exploration on our own.
Exactly. This deep dive was just the beginning. Now it's your turn to find what speaks to you. Are you drawn to the fiery spices of South India, the rich curries of the North, or the subtle flavors of a traditional Gujarati thali? What calls to your palate?
Such good question to think about. And remember what the source said about food in India being a spiritual and social experience. I want our listener to consider that. What does that mean to you? How does food connect to your own WN life and culture?
And never forget, Indian cuisine is more than just recipes. It's a window into a vibrant culture, a testament to the power of food to nourish, to heal, and to bring people together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think we've given our listener a lot to chew on. Literally, this has been an incredible journey, and I'm already dreaming about my next Indian food adventure.
Me too. Remember, every bite is a chance to explore, to discover, and to connect. So go out there and enjoy the incredible world of Indian cuisine.
Happy eating, everyone!